Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Merry Christmas Eve to those who celebrate. We've got a good topic for you today. Let's do it. What are some of your paranormal stories? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I was probably about 8 years old. We lived in a rural community in an old farmhouse on an acre. Across from the house was a long guest house. Basically a rectangular room with nothing in it. The back door of the house looked across the yard to the guest house door, both facing each other with a window just to the side to the guest house door. I walked into the back of the house just as the back door burst open. My older brother and two of his friends ran in screaming and ran past me into the house. I went to the door to see what was up. In the window of the guest house was a shadow staring back at me. There was a rainbow radiating out from the solar plexus. I slammed the door shut. Later I found out my bro and his friends were playing with a Ouija board and thought someone was in the room. Not mine, but a family member's. My grandpa got sick unexpectedly and died after a couple of weeks in the hospital. Right before he got sick, he and my grandma were getting ready to fly across the country to see their son's new house he just bought with his wife. My grandpa spent decades in construction, and everyone valued his opinion on home-related stuff. A few weeks after he died, my uncle had a dream where he woke up to the doorbell ringing, and when he answered it, my grandpa was standing there and said, "P, I checked everything out, and the house is great. You guys will be very happy here." When my uncle woke up, he was actually standing in his open doorway, and it was still the middle of the night. We all considered it his way of letting us know he was okay, and that he still showed up to check the house. I grew up in a house that I swear was haunted. Over the years I've heard clicking like a mouse even though no one was making the noise, and it would go away the second I got close enough to investigate. I've seen faces fading into thin air directly in front of me. I've seen full apparitions appear and suddenly disappear, either in the living room or on the stairs. I've heard whispers at night. I saw a shadow figure directly in front of me in a well-lit room where the light was between me and the shadow. Of course, it dissolved, allowing me to see the stuff it was preventing me from seeing. Mini fridge, coffee maker, microwave. I would feel pressure on my chest while sleeping that never happened anywhere else. I would also feel an indent in the carpet right behind me, as if someone was standing there and no one was. The most recent thing was when I was sitting on the couch with my dog watching TV, and suddenly we both saw what looked like someone darting into another room after peeking at us through the doorway. I was home alone at this point and decided to investigate. There was no sound of footsteps up the stairs. We would have heard the door or windows open and close. There were a few other things, but in general, the house was pretty creepy. I eventually had gotten used to the stuff happening. In my early 20s, I was home alone with my dog at my parents' house. Hot day, so I had the windows open. No AC unless it was 100 plus, typical dad rule. A rare gust of wind blew and slammed my door shut, no biggie. Then my door opened, and the location of my room, there was no way another gust of wind could have come from another room or window. Plus my door is slammed shut, and you had to turn the knob to open it. I got up to see if anyone was home. Nope. My dad says someone died in our house, but I could never prove it. But there have been 3 suicides on my parents' street. 2 of them I know. Crazy stuff. In Nicaragua, my cousins told me about a place where you speak to the devil and ask for something. We all snuck out and went to this shack on a hill. The full moon lit up the path. We stood on the hillside and said we were ready to speak to him. Nothing. So we started walking back when we saw a very normal-looking man. I remember he looked small to us. He walked past us and said that we should head home because that area was creepy. The 6 of us walked on, but we decided to ask the man something. When we turned around to ask him, although he had just passed us, the dude was like 1 mile down the trail. We all got goosebumps. How did he make it a mile down the trail in like 10 seconds? And then we started to hear him laughing hysterically. We all ran all the way home. We were 16 at the time. We're all in our 30s. And when we have our cousin's Zoom call, we don't bring it up. It scared the crap out of us. I can still remember the sound of the laugh. Lesson: urban myths always have a nugget of truth. My mom passed at home from cancer when I was 19. One night I was getting ready to go out. I was standing in the hallway doing my makeup at our linen closet. It had a full-length mirror inside the door. I closed the door and walked away, and all of a sudden I heard this weird, low, vibrating sound. I searched everywhere and couldn't find where the sound was coming from. I passed by that linen closet and could tell it was coming from there. I'm thinking, what the f*** is that? As I opened the door, it immediately got louder. I knelt down and dug around the bottom storage area, and that's where I found it. When I was young, we had a plastic bed you could put in the bathtub to mimic a jacuzzi. My mom loved it. I used batteries, and it was honestly the coolest thing, but it hadn't been used or even touched in at least 10 years. The switch was in the off position, but this effer was on. The switch was gunked up, and I had a hard time flipping it, but I switched it on, then back off, then tried to turn it on again. It wouldn't turn on. My mom always knew I loved spooky shit and wanted to experience it, and by golly, she made a believer out of me. She pulled a few other shenanigans in that house too before I moved out. Miss you, Mom. My father died 21 years ago from cancer. The day after he died, I saw him in my mom's kitchen, leaning against the doorframe and watching my brother. He looked healthy and happy, smiling. He didn't look like a vision. He looked as solid and real as the rest of us. It lasted maybe 3 seconds, and nobody else saw him. But I feel in my heart he was there. This happened to me in the late 1980s. I was practicing acoustic guitar, and I would frequently record myself on a boombox, playing along with whatever song I was trying to learn. I did this track to my progress. One day I took a break and forgot to stop recording. When I came back, I listened to my last attempt while I was tuning up to play again. I heard an older woman's voice whisper on tape, "I just want to crawl up inside of you." I freaked the hell out. To this day, I can still clearly remember this voice. I get the willies every time I tell the story. What I was learning was the instrumental D from the Ozzy Osbourne Diary of a Madman album. I lived in a beautiful apartment built in the 1920s, just beneath the Griffith Observatory in LA. It was a temporary sublet. At the time, I didn't believe in the paranormal, but by the time I left this apartment, my mind had been changed. My bed would shake at night, and I'd sometimes wake up with scratches on my body. One night, when the bed was shaking, I yelled, "Stop!" and it ceased for the night. When I moved out, I met with the landlord, a very bizarre woman, and I asked her if she experienced anything like that. She just laughed and said, "Yeah, that happens sometimes. Thanks a lot, lady." I was around 12 years old, and my friends and I lived in a small town and loved ATVs. Anyway, we, my 3 friends, drove separately in our vehicles to the creek. We all went our separate ways and never met back up for a few hours. Keep in mind, back then, there was no form of communication. I figured my best friend eventually went home and put his dirt bike in the shed as usual. His parents were gone at the time. I entered their house and yelled my buddy's name, late 1800s house, and I heard a vicious "What?" I replied, "Quit me, asshole," because we were known to prank each other, and I said, "Where are you?" In response, the same voice said, "Over here." It seemed to sound like the voice came from behind the couch, so I went over there and moved the couch to find nothing. At this point, I felt a very uncomfortable, indescribable feeling. I immediately left and drove my ATV to my house. There I see my buddies in my garage waiting on me. Right then and there, I knew the afterlife or ghosts were real. I was so shaken up my friends thought I was going insane. My friend ended up telling his parents about the event, and apparently this wasn't the first encounter. His stay-at-home mother said there were very strange happenings, including her hanging oil lamp falling off the wall followed by a distinct growl. She also had her phone on the arm of a chair light up one night and dialed a multitude of numbers. They bought the house from a third-generation family where that died in the room that children slept in. This house was the original homestead in the town. Well, if that was a prank, that was a pretty darn good one. And if it was a ghost, that's pretty freaky. What do you guys think? Lived on a large farm for a while. The main house, unoccupied, was built and dated to 1779. It had a few rooms that when I did go in to check things and use the addition that had a laundry room, I either felt like I was watched or it had an eerie quietness about it. Three things still stick with me, almost 20 years later. The door to the basement was heavy and had an old-fashioned round knob as well as a skeleton key-type lock. Every time I would walk by the door, it was cracked open. I would close it and make sure it was secure, only to come back to it being about 4 inches open. In the basement was the original kitchen and a dark, empty room. You could see the ledge and smoke from where they used to cook in the fireplace, since sealed internally. In the dark, empty room, I always felt like I was being watched. Not in a bad way, but those eyes were on me, and I needed to respect the space. I once accidentally locked my dog inside the house. She followed me in, as she normally would. I must have been distracted and walked out without her. An hour or so later, I hear her barking. I go to get her, and she's on the top floor in a room where the door wasn't open a full 90, so part of the room was blocked from my view. Her body language and stance told me not to enter. She was backed into the far corner and would look toward the area I couldn't see, bare her teeth and raise her hackles, and give her "I'll kill you" growl. She would then look quietly at me with a "help me" scared expression. She was a 90-pound Rottweiler. Rottie's growls mean business. I started to back up toward the stairs and yelled her name and for her to come. I was one and done, and she knew I wasn't sticking around. I don't know what she saw, but I wasn't about to investigate. She bolted toward me, and I took off down the stairs, with her right behind me. She would not pass me, but she also couldn't have been any closer to me without pushing me down the stairs. The third and final thing that happened was when I FAFO, and at least it felt like that. In the backyard of this house was an old-fashioned dinner bell. It was mounted on a thick railroad tie type of wood, with a long chain attached from a bell that was 7 to 8 feet high to about 4 inches off the ground on the tie. I don't know why I did it, but I decided to ring the bell. It took some muscle and work because no one rang the bell and it had been exposed to years of weather. I was the only person living on the farm in the other smaller house, and the owners of the farm refused to live there. I never got a reason, but I have my suspicions that something happened in that house that may have spooked them. Anyway, I'm standing there with both hands on the chain, using my body weight when the bell gave and started to ring. It was much louder than expected, and I was quite pleased that I got it to move and ring. My back was to the house, and I'm glad that it was, because out of nowhere my body went cold. I stiffened, the hair on my neck stood up, and I felt as if I had just royally pissed her off. Who was she? No idea. I was looking straight ahead toward the hayfields, and the house was behind me, but I had a clear image of a woman in a dress with a slight hoop skirt. Not sure that's the word, but not a big poof, 1800s style dress, with one arm around a boy and the other a girl. The kids looked down at me with a, "Oh no, that's Mama's bell. She's not supposed to touch Mama's bell." Whoever she was pissed. How dare I touch what was hers? How dare I enter her home? And she knew I was trouble that needed to be dealt with. I had these images and thoughts all fly through my head in an instant. I started shaking, walked straight ahead toward the fence, climbed up and over, and refused to look toward the house as I walked toward the barn. It took me a long time before I could enter the home. I hauled my laundry to the laundromat, fairly certain that when I did finally re-enter the home, I took someone with me when I did. Years after I moved on, I met the people that rented the whole farm and lived in the main house. They had so many stories, and if it were me, I would not have stayed. They were there for almost 3 years before buying their own farm. There was this infamous road where there was a lot of deaths at this part. We were teens and wanted to go ghost hunting, but when we got into the woods, there were no ghosts, but a crackling bright blue orb about 1 foot in diameter and 6 feet off the ground, slowly moving. Nothing under it, nothing around. Middle of nowhere in a forest. Everyone saw it. No one can think of a reason for it. We were hoping or expecting a ghost, but a fucking orb. We looked at each other, looked back, and then did the Jedi run, getting out of there. Another good one. About 2 to 3 a.m., I was asleep and attacked by a human-like shaped figure that was invisible, like flexible glass. I could somewhat see it because I fell asleep with my laptop on, and the light reflected on the edges. It woke me up, and I could feel its emotions. It jumped on me and tried stabbing me. I'm strong, but it was like I was wearing a bulletproof vest. He was pissed as shit, kept trying to stab harder and harder. No getting through. I could feel his anger and how unexpected this was for them. I did then start to antagonize him a little. That's just me. It was a long time, and I started having fun with it. Eventually, I got tired of it and prayed to whatever gods to remove this being, and he flew away. I know it's an authentic experience because I immediately grabbed said laptop and Googled all kinds of shit, trying to figure out what that was, and they were timestamped. I've had many paranormal experiences in my lifetime. I do live in a haunted house and have most of my life. Nothing evil, just something that likes to be known. Anyway, I'm not here to talk about that. There are too many to write. A little bit of context. My father passed away in 2003 when I was 9 years old. He was a great guy. Everyone loved him. He liked to joke and loved kids. He was very much into paranormal stuff, and it's something we would talk about often. Anyway, fast forward to 2011. I just had my daughter. I took her to his grave when she was a month old, took some pictures, and that was that. When she was about 18 months old, my mom had accidentally taken a wrong turn, and we ended up passing the cemetery. My daughter, out of nowhere, goes, "Hi, Tata Paul," and keeps waving and repeating, "Hi, Tata Paul." I wasn't paying attention. I was texting, and my mom hit me and said, "Do you hear your daughter?" I stopped what I was doing and paid attention. I tell my mom to pull into the cemetery to see what she would do. I take her out of her car seat, and she waddles her way right to his grave. She's talking and saying hi to Tata Paul. So I look at the grave and say hi. She looks at me and says, "Mama, Tata Paul ain't there. Tata Paul is there," and points right next to me. I got a chill. My mom got a chill, but we let her continue to talk. Now, this is baby talk, but any parent who knows their child can understand them. So we knew what she was saying. We stayed about 15 minutes, and she had a whole conversation with my dad. I know we couldn't see him, but she definitely did. I want to point out that we never talk about my dad, so for her to even know his name and go to his grave really made me believe. The last time she was there, she was 1 month old. No way she could have known what grave to go to. After that, though, she would have had a conversation in our house or in the car with him. She actually came up to me around 3, asking about the tooth fairy. When I asked how she knew about the tooth fairy, because I had never mentioned it, she told me Tata Paul told her. I firmly believed she knew him, and he was with her. I have a lot more reason and things she said to believe he was talking with her, but I don't want to make this post any longer. She also talked to other spirits while she was younger, but at the age of 8, it all stopped. I guess she gets too old to see things. Anyways, I will always remember how she knew my dad. It gave me peace knowing he was watching over her, my mom, and me. I was about 8 or 9 years old, and we were living in a house that we had bought from an elderly couple. The wife died in the house, and the husband later moved in with his family. I woke up one night and saw the old woman walk through our bedroom door, past the end of the bed, and through the wall where the bathroom door used to be before my dad moved it to be off the kitchen. Also, several times I'd be brushing my teeth in the bathroom and would see her walk through in the reflection of the mirror. There were 2 mirrors, one over the sink and the other directly on the wall behind the sink where the door once was. One involved my son, who was about 5 to 6 years old. I didn't see anything, but he did. We were at the cemetery visiting the grave of my friend, who I named him after. After a few minutes, he got really scared and started crying. When we got back in the car, I calmed him down. He told me he was scared because a man he could see through was standing behind me. I asked him to describe the man, and he described my friend exactly like he was when he died. To my knowledge, he had never seen photos of him before that day. But when we got home, I pulled out photos, and he said it was the same man but with different hair because it was shorter. The photos I had were from high school and a little later, and he had a mullet in those pictures. He then went into the military and cut all his hair off. And that was what it was like when he passed away.